this Monday, June 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Master Plan Working Group. We'll begin by calling the roll. Please respond if you're here. John Allen.
Here.
Julie Capizzello. Bob Carroll. Doreen DeFazio. Victoria Duckworth. Susan Duval. I think I see Susan's name here. Well, I'll circle back. Lindsay Fox.
Here.
Anne Marie Foley.
Here.
Deborah George. Julie Grace.
Here.
Linda Hassinger.
Here.
Justin Hollander. Brian Houle.
Here.
Chantel Kimball.
Here.
Essek Petrie. David Robbins here. Sue Robbins.
Here. Here.
Colleen Roy.
Colleen's here. It looks like Sue Duvall was Sue Robbins.
Roshan Utangi. I saw Roshan's name pop up a moment ago, and then it fell off again. Susan Duval, are you able to hear us?
I'm here. Sorry, I had technical difficulties before finding the mute button or unmute button.
Yes, no problem. So I have 11 people currently in attendance, which is one greater than the minimum of 10 required for a quorum. So we are ready to proceed. Our first action item would be to approve meeting minutes, of which I understand we don't have any available as of yet.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Deborah has been sick, so she hasn't been able to get to them. So if we could skip over that, that'd be great. Apologies.
We'll excuse her for that this time. Okay, the next agenda item is an action item to approve the findings, goals, and objectives for the open space and recreation and natural and cultural resources chapters. So I think that would be Elena and Sarah.
Yeah, so these would be the goals we presented last time. They just need your final approval.
Yeah, Elena, do you have them at the ready? I can click through and pull them up, but I didn't have a chance to pull them up
Sure.
before the meeting.
Let me just, I don't have them open, so give me just 1 second to look for them.
Sure. Sorry, I should have had them open myself, but it's a mad scramble this evening. I was eating dinner and like driving and
No, that makes sense. I should have had them ready too. It's going to take me 1 minute.
Sure, take your time.
I think we can give you that minute.
Thank you.
I see
Hey,
Roshan.
Yeah, I just joined. Sorry, there was some issue with the Zoom.
Good old Zoom.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Zoom is convenient in many ways when it's working well.
Exactly.
Okay. So I have the version we used last time that includes the notes. I think, Sarah, do you want to share? You're going to be sharing your screen. Do you want me to share that with you, or should I share my screen? I'm just trying to be efficient here.
If you share your screen with this, and then I'll share my screen for the other action items.
Sounds good. Let me just do that. Okay, so open space and recreation draft goals and objectives. And I will just quickly scroll through them. This is what we talked about last time. The red is basically the notes that we have. And we've already approved the land use.
All right, any comments or thoughts?
Colleen has her hand up.
up.
So can I, if you're ready, I can just make a motion and then we can discuss any little bits left and get going if you're okay with that, Dave.
I think that would be appropriate.
All right, so I move that we approve the goals and objectives for the open space and recreation and nature and cultural resources chapter.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. This is basically, as I understand, this is what came out of the previous meeting. It
That
was
is correct.
pretty thoroughly discussed at the previous meeting.
That's right.
So with if there are no further comments, I will call for a vote. John Allen,
In the affirmative.
Susan Duval,
I approved.
Lindsay Fox,
Aye.
Anne Marie Foley,
Fully aye.
Julie Grace,
Aye.
Linda Hassinger,
Aye.
Brian Hool,
Aye.
Chantal Kimball,
Aye.
David Robbins votes aye, Sue Robbins,
Aye.
Eileen Roy,
Aye.
and Roshana Tongi.
Aye.
Great. Declare the motion carried unanimously. Onwards. We now have our first two draft chapters to take a look at. Correct?
That's right. And thank you for your comments so far. Today, we'll be talking about the quality of life chapter and the services and facilities chapter. Given the limitations of our time today, we are going to talk about primarily about the key findings and some select goals. But anything you want to highlight, whether it's an action item or a goal, we can obviously prioritize it and put it up for a discussion. I just wanted to note that the goals evolved a little bit along with the action items. So there are some, I would say, minor changes from what you approved last time. So when you approve the chapter as well, I just wanted to let the committee know that those changed a little bit too. I will let Sarah lead the discussion today because she developed these two chapters, but you know, we'll take any questions and any comments along the way. So anything you want to bring up, again, we will prioritize, but otherwise we will not go action item by action item, which is something we've already done when we develop the goals. We'll just do select topics for today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah, unless you have any questions for us.
I think I saw Colleen put her hand up.
Yeah, never mind. I'm gonna reserve it. Never mind.
Elena, if it's appropriate, I wonder if we could propose to keep the comment period open a little bit longer, if anybody else hasn't had the chance to read, since it was Memorial Day weekend and the start of summer, if that would make sense. Does that sound helpful to the committee? I think we have comments from about 4 people or 5 people.
Yeah, I had not had a chance to review this material prior to this weekend. I have quite a number of comments.
Mhm.
So rather than, for the most part, if I can, submit them to you in writing rather than spending an awful lot of time this evening discussing them, it'd probably be good.
Sure.
That would be perfect. And whether you fill out the form or you send them by email, either way, we can incorporate them. So written comments are very helpful.
Yeah, I saw somebody commented on the document too. That works too. Anything's fine.
Yeah,
So maybe we can say another week. Does that seem helpful?
Just a quick question.
Yes.
I don't see the little raise hand thing. Sorry, Dave, through you. So to email them, because I did write some things down, like I wasn't able to sort out how to do it online. So emailing them to Fiona, or
That would be perfect.
is that the emails? Is that where the emails to us are getting generated from? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I can do that. Thanks.
Sarah and Elena, so sorry, I uploaded my comments directly into the matrix. Was I not supposed to do that?
No, that's perfect.
Oh, no, that's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to, if it's easier, and I think it might be easier for a lot of folks to send their comments directly to me, but I think I will, if Sarah and Elena, if that's okay with you, I will just plop the link to the matrix in the chat
Yeah.
as well. Okay, great. I'll do that now, just so.
And I see Colleen has her hand up.
So since we're going to keep this open for a little bit longer, you did mention that there were some changes. Do you mind just covering what those changes were tonight?
You know, they span from small copy edits to additions. So we don't have them in track changes. I completely appreciate that question. We don't have them in track changes. The goals stay pretty much the same in their intention.
The additions, though, do you maybe know?
So
are
I
they-
don't think,
Okay.
anything, I wouldn't say there are any major changes, but Sarah, am I correct to say that we didn't do any major additions or any major new goals that we could highlight?
We added a little bit to the school system upon talking to the superintendent for a second time. Because he was waiting on a report for future enrollment. So we were able to add that before sending the draft. So that's under the first goal. And those are just action items. I think that was the biggest thing.
I can send that report to you, Sarah and Elaine, as well, because I actually wrapped that up for him the other day. So I'll make sure to get you that info.
Right, that info is what's been incorporated to the first goal.
Oh, it's been incorporated. Okay, sorry. Gotcha.
Cool.
Brian,
it looks-
Brian and Chantel have their hand up
Awesome.
in that order.
Okay, just quickly, I had made comments using the comment button in the document. So I wasn't
Mhm.
sure if that's what you wanted me to do, but that's what I did. So
Yeah, that works.
if there was another way, I didn't know about it. So I just did make that. Hopefully you got that.
Yeah,
We
totally
did,
works.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chantal?
Only because you just mentioned having talked to the superintendent, I actually had a lot of questions about the school stuff because they seemed very specific and very expensive. So I was just kind of wondering like where those specific, like for example, we should add a third floor onto the high school sounded very like specific and expensive, and then tied to vocational education. I like that kind of surprised me to see in this document in this context based on prior conversations. So I'm just wondering if some of those bigger ticket items, another one was to build a pre-K through 1 school to get rid of North and South Grafton. So I was just curious where some of those like big expensive ideas had come from, and if someone could walk us through that.
Sure. Yeah, those action items came directly from the superintendent on more long-range planning. So we didn't add some of the smaller projects that could be in a capital improvement plan, but we did add these two projects as potential exactly big ticket items that the town should be aware of, could potentially be a need. He specifically brought up vocational offerings as a huge direction that the school wants to go in for future expansion of programs, and something that could be a huge pull for, keeping workforce in Grafton as well, and offering more options than, leaving Grafton to go to college. So that was something we were very interested in including in this plan as a recommendation.
Yeah, and I think, the drive behind the expansion of vocational education is that Grafton is currently losing students to other vocational education systems. That's also very costly. So this would definitely be a long range goal. But that direction may end up being advantageous for the town in terms of school funding.
Certainly, like the increasing and improving vocational education was not a little bit of a surprise to me. Like that
Right.
seems very important and timely. It was just the layer of like building a third floor onto the high school paired with that struck me as being like a little strangely specific. But if it came directly from Dr. Cummings, that makes a little bit more sense.
Yep.
It's just not
Now,
something
maybe-
we talked about here.
I should point out that when we designed that school, we designed it with the expectation of adding a third floor on that one pod.
Mhm.
Probably at the time, the thinking, as I recall, was more along the lines of just accommodating increasing enrollment rather than any specific programs. But yeah, that dropping another floor on that building has been in the plans from the beginning. So,
Yeah, I knew it was an option from like it was just the context that surprised me a little.
yeah, I hadn't heard because I'm not all that close to everything all the thinking that's going on in the school side of things to begin with, but the idea of expanding our vocational programs within Grafton High School is interesting, probably very worthwhile, but that's not a concept I'd heard mentioned before. Anne Marie.
Thanks. I agree with Chantel. I understand the vision, like, putting the vision of increasing vocational offerings, etc., in the master plan. But I do agree that the you know what I'm trying to say, related to like the exact buildings and the, again, I know that we had the third floor as a potential since the beginning, but I agree that it just seems quite specific. It's almost like saying in the open space that parcel, or that we're going to purchase 35 North Street for a park or something. So it seemed to me, I agree that it was a little bit specific in that regard. And then just on a just global thing, I did find it super helpful that like Fiona and Chantel and someone else's comments were in that document. So I don't know, and again, I can't say that I contributed because I need to just email them in, but if maybe, if we're just reviewing that again, if everyone's could almost go over there, if there's, obviously there's going to be some overlap, because a lot of what I was going to put in had already been covered, but that's just kind of a general comment.
Yeah, if anybody emails us or writes comments, we'll put them all in that document, also for your review as well as we go through and respond to them, so they're all in one place.
And maybe it may be helpful to provide some context for these recommendations by directly referring to some of the documents that the superintendent sent to us to provide context that this does come from the long-range planning of the school and superintendent.
Any other thoughts on town services and facilities that would be helpful to discuss as a group?
Let me see, there was.
We can also, we could walk through the key findings. But of course, we want to start with what you think we should prioritize today. But we can do this by walking through the key findings and select goals.
I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything that I think we really need to talk about this evening. I suspect most of that, most of my comments are sufficient to send in to you, and you can take those into account in updating the text.
Mr. Chair, I think Anne Marie has her hand up.
Yes.
Thank you. One just general comment, I suppose, and I think someone put this in the other comments. I thought it was interesting, like mentioning, I appreciate what the other towns are doing, and I certainly looked at all those references. I think it was great, but I don't know about putting that into our master plan, like the references to other towns. I think it's fabulous that we can utilize that data, in terms of what they're doing and not reinvent the wheel, certainly, but I wasn't sure about having all those other towns mentioned in our master plan.
Do you know which under which area that was, or
I
project?
can play that. I know it was like Westboro, Spencer. There were a number of them.
Yeah.
I can try to pull it up,
Okay.
but I can pull it up. Not right this second, but I can get it for you.
Yeah, there was a reference to Spencer and the cable television, using the cable television social media. We can certainly remove those or keep them as footnotes if you think, the text should be that real estate would be better allocated by talking about Grafton.
Yep. Right now, are we discussing town services specifically, or are we kind of covering
Yes.
both?
Town services right now.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah. Just kind of for the sake of mentioning, I think I'll say, if I were the South Grafton Water District, I would feel left out reading this.
Mhm.
There's a lot of text in there about the Grafton Water District and very little about the South Grafton Water District. Yeah, I think they should kind of get, sort of equal treatment there. Even though the Grafton Water District is the majority of the town, the South Grafton Water District is historically, it's allowed older as part of the town. And it's
absolutely.
equally important for those people who get their water from the South Grafton District.
Mhm.
I think Chantel has her hand up.
Thanks. I
Chantal,
know we were talking about what to prioritize for discussion among the group, but if we're gonna keep the document open for another week to like read and put input, I'm wondering if our time might be best spent hearing about some of the key findings with some of the context from people who were spoken to in developing those that like we might not otherwise have information about. I hope I said that well.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We can go
Yeah.
through the key findings. For town services and facilities, the first key finding is to increase water and sewer capacity to anticipate population growth. So this comes out of population projections on how many people Grafton should anticipate in the next 20 to 30 years.
And I think one to mention, sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, go for it.
But I think the impetus behind this was also some conversations we've had with MBI, Massachusetts Biomedical Initiative. They mentioned the need for facilities and for infrastructure. And they also mentioned that there will be spillover from Worcester from the life sciences industry and manufacturing. And one of the main requirements of developers, as Grafton already knows, because actually Grafton has pioneered outreach to developers and engaging developers and making developments happen. Infrastructure is probably the main incentives for developers to come to Grafton. And that was underscored by our conversations with MBI. So we thought, you know, this is probably one of the first items that need to be mentioned here. It's, once again, this is expensive. It takes, there's way more behind this and this process and this expense for the town. But the idea is to accommodate population and attract the type of development that brings life sciences to Grafton.
I'd also just add, Elaine, if you don't mind, this is totally necessary. I mean, water and sewer infrastructure is really, really critical. I mean, in our zoning, all multifamily development, excuse me, is required to be hooked up to sewer. So, and we're also just seeing the need to increase and increase the sizing of piping where feasible, and as well as extend the existing piping. So this is, you know, I'm talking to DPW all the time about this type of work. You know, we really want to see this grow. You know, there's certain portions of town that have adequate service, but there's still a lot of work that we can do, as we saw on the maps in the draft, which I really appreciated. So yeah, I just want to voice my strong support based on my day-to-day that this is absolutely a key finding, and it's really very critical for all types of development.
Yeah, thanks for that point, Fiona. And, you know, I think part of this, and we do get to this later on in the chapter, is engaging very early on entities such as the South Grafton Water District and the Grafton Water District, bringing them to the table, because if they say no, then something doesn't happen. So very early on, it's important to do outreach to these entities, particularly since they're private entities.
Our second key finding is on a similar note of just general infrastructure upgrades for the same life science facilities and pharmaceutical manufacturing buildings. So that's thinking about, you know, North Grafton, close to the highway, close to Worcester, what might still be needed for the science park area, and how to continue supporting the development of that area. The third finding comes directly from the fire department for construction of a new fire station. As what we found in our findings as the top facility need of a rebuild would be the old fire stations, not only for higher capacity, but for the size of new fire trucks and the age of the buildings. Yeah, Fiona?
Yeah, I just had a question. I was curious if you, you know, I've been in Grafton a while now, and I've talked to the chief and staff here and there, but we're all volunteer. And honestly, the rate that Grafton is growing, I mean, I don't know, did the chief or anybody that you spoke to think about considering hiring more full-time firefighters? And I just feel like they are very, very busy. I don't know, it's just something that I've noticed. And if we can put some sort of recommendation or like some sort of, or just some recognition that current, you know, staffing levels, like with volunteer firefighters, seem to be sustaining themselves. However, with the growth that Grafton is seeing, we might need to consider full-time positions. I'm not sure if they mentioned anything. I don't want to speak for them, but it's something I noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. He did mention that in our conversation a few months ago as an option for potential full-time. So we can do a more distinct mention of that.
I just know from planning's perspective, like the volume, like there's only one fire safety officer that is reviewing all the development proposals that like the planning board, Concom, et cetera, review. And it's, you know, it's a lot of work for one person. So I could see that, like, even if it was like somebody with specialty in that regard, it would be interesting.
Yeah, Colleen had her hand up a moment ago.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe mention I don't know the best way to word this, but I wanted to throw caution out that there is a very strong feeling about having our call department, and it's very, it's very built into the fabric of Grafton. But that being said, I would hate to word it in such a way where people could point to it and say, well, we can't have any more building here because then we'll have to have full-time fire. So just to caution on how to word it, that is all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Chantel?
Yeah, Colleen and I are very much on the same wavelength, because through a lot of this discussion, there's such a heavy emphasis on preparing for future growth and all these expenses associated with preparing for future growth. And the first thing everybody says when anyone wants to put any new buildings up anywhere in Grafton is, we can't put new buildings up because it's going to be too expensive. We're going to have to build new schools. We're going to have to hire a new fire department. We're going to have to do, dig new wells, which the water department assures this is not the case. But, like, I just wonder, I'm not wording this the best way, but like, which is true? Like, is it not that big a deal when someone wants to build 100 apartments because we need the housing, and it's not really going to be a huge influx in the schools and a huge burden on our emergency services? Or like, are we downplaying the burden on emergency services and schools and everything? Like which is it? Because right now this document is reading a lot like Grafton's going to get huge and we need to prepare, and it's going to get expensive.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point, and we've tried to stay sensitive to limited town capacity, but also to fiscal health of the town. Obviously, there cannot be unlimited spending and tax increases, property tax increases. But maybe we need to have in the overview a conversation about there will be infrastructure needs, but there's a need for the town to stay fiscally healthy. But there's also growth that has to be dealt with. This is a regional problem. There are no easy answers. I see John has his hand up.
And Brian
Yes.
had his hand up first, and Brian and then John.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was in terms of the state, if they have recommendation in terms of numbers for firefighters for population, you've got X amount of homes or families in Grafton. Yeah, we would look to that number to see where we are at in terms of, the ideal number. I would think that there's got to be some, other than some just arbitrary, we need to hire more people or bring more people in. There has to be some kind of information that has already been researched that would tell us that this is the ideal number of police officers, ideal number of firefighters for this size community. I don't know how that would go into the master plan, but there seems to be some confusion about numbers here. So that's it.
John?
I've sensed at times a position almost like, and this goes beyond this committee, there's a sense that people don't want the town to grow. They want it to stay the same. It's perfect as it is. And I was wondering if Elena can talk about what the negative effects would be if the town doesn't grow.
That's a really great question, John. The consensus about that, there is no consensus about this, but towns, it's called a trilemma. Do you spend money on growth? Do you expand, and do you expand the infrastructure to accommodate growth? Or do you keep the town fiscally healthy, the debt low, the debt service under control? Or do you let your taxes go up? You can't have all three. You have to choose to kind of catch 22. And I think every town, this is a fiscal decision first and foremost. The perils are that the less amenities you provide, the less working families you attract, and revenue ends up going down. And then your taxes go up because there are gaps that need to be covered in town services by fewer and fewer residents. That balancing act is a science that the town administrator usually engineers, but the risk is the less amenities, the less growth, the less revenue the town attracts. I hope that captures the answer to your question.
So to re-paraphrase it, if you don't grow based on the shrinkage, taxes will go up because there's fewer people to contribute to the tax base.
Yes.
That is correct. Services needs, remain the same, especially sewer, water infrastructure. And, user fees go up. There are various ways in which the burden is increasing on residents. User fees is one of them. Property taxes is another. I see Chantel has her hand up.
I mean, just circling down to the same, back to the same point, I just wonder if, like, in some of these spots where we're saying, like, I just wonder if there's a way to emphasize the balance as opposed to like I was reading about the water and sewer increase, and I think one of the bullets had incorrect math, because I don't think the usage numbers made sense, but it still read a very lot like a sense of urgency. And I'm not talking about the biotech part because that makes sense and is a little bit more insulated, but that read a little bit like something that might get people concerned that building is not a good thing because it doesn't emphasize that balance. It just kind of says, oh, we need to, we're going to outgrow our sewer system, or we're, kind of in this panicked place. And I picked up on that. It was similar with some of the school stuff. We're getting ready to probably be in another override situation because just providing level services is over the 2.5% that we're allowed to increase. And then there's sort of all these, like, honestly, amazing objectives, things that I would support 100%. But if I'm, looking at, oh my God, how much are they trying to raise my taxes is sort of how it starts to come across at a certain point. So maybe making sure that some of the language is more balanced would sort of do the trick. I don't.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you probably picked up on that infrastructure, and I will let Sarah speak to this, but I think the finer point we were trying to make there is it really was about sprawl. So the costs of infrastructure as you extend the system outward with single family homes rather than doing infill development, for example. So that was a way to address growth. That doesn't say we need a growth moratorium because it's going to get more and more expensive to expand the system. Sarah, maybe you can elaborate on that point that we made.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sums it up. As Chantel, I think that's a fantastic point. We could definitely add more of that sprinkled in everywhere. This is a tough chapter to go first, I think, because a lot of the other chapters like land use and housing will talk more about the strategy of how to accommodate future growth in a way that is more in the same kind of strategies we're talking about, cost effective for the town, while keeping as Dave would say, many characters of Grafton alive. And this chapter kind of sums up how we're going to accommodate all of it, but it can come off as a little scared. So that's a great note. Thank you.
Sue Robbins has her hand up.
I just want to make the comment that this master plan is to go for like, what, 20 years? So if we don't put things in now, and if it scares the people, we have to remind them that this is a very long range plan and it's not 5-year plan. And I just don't agree that we should not put stuff in and make it sound like it's balanced, because we have to be realistic here. Things are going to have to happen, and some catastrophe could happen in the town, and we're going to have to take care of it. So I think we need to be realistic and put in things what needs to be put in.
Yep, I
And I'd
think,
say the opposite can also be true of fantastic things can happen and the federal government can come out with a grant that says, we'll help you expand your water. And Grafton could be able to point to this document and say, we've been planning for this, we're ready for it, and we would like some of that money too, please. So we have a lot of audiences to kind of satisfy here.
I
And-
think I've
and
got
here-
like 3 hands up: Fiona, Anne Marie, and Colleen.
I just was, Sue kind of took the words out of my mouth. Change is inevitable. If we don't account for long range growth and the projections that we're seeing, I mean, Grafton's population has increased, I think, 2% in a year, I'm pretty sure. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's a lot. And it's been significant uptick since 2010 and especially since 2000. So it's Grafton's a very, very popular, very sought after area now. And I think whether, folks in town, want to see it or not, unfortunately, like there's change is happening. It's going to continue to happen. And if we don't include this information in the plan now, we're not going to be able to apply for grants or have as much opportunities to try and secure outside sources of funding that the town simply could not be able to shoulder the burden of on their own. So I just, I understand where people are coming from, and that, a lot of folks who grew up in Grafton and love, Grafton as it is, but it's just the reality of the situation is in the market. It's changing place. So I just want to make sure that we do, as Sue mentioned, capture and be kind of realistic about what's going on.
And thank you for that point, Fiona. I think it's okay to be aspirational in the plan, because that helps the case for future funding applications. The fact that something is in the master plan is sometimes a requirement, sometimes an implicit requirement of grants.
All right, Anne Marie.
Sorry, and I'm coming in late because Sue and Fiona said most of what I was going to come in as, a little bit of devil's advocate, but I do agree in that, there is going to be a burden. There is a burden currently, and we need to be looking at this in the next 10 to 20 years. There certainly will be a burden to sewer, water, schools I'm not sure about, but, to services in this town. And if having this language in this kind of global chapter I think, I'm not sure if it was Sarah's or Elena's point, where, in further chapters, we will kind of break this down, but this is kind of like the global look in terms of this is what we may need. And then that might potentially help us, to everyone's point, Fiona, with grant applications, et cetera. So, expanding, bringing in a light industrial park on, somewhere in this town, we need to have the capacity to be able to support that, because we all talk about economic development, et cetera. So I think that I didn't find maybe to your point, Chantel, like the school part of it might have been a little heavy, but I thought that this was well stated. Thank you.
All right, I want to try to get this, we've got a few other topics to address, but we've got now, oh my goodness, Colleen, Lindsay, Roshan, all have their hands up. Colleen?
So that was the first time I'd heard the word trilemma. Is there a way to just include a graphic real quick, which could kind of sum up a lot of what we just all discussed, and then you can hit the real points in the verbiage?
Yes, absolutely. I think that would be helpful. A trilemma, I've seen it used before in the context of resiliency and the perils of not investing in infrastructure because the town doesn't want to take on debt or wants to keep taxes low. Again, it comes from resiliency, but we can, again, using it this case, to refer to more than just infrastructure upgrades to prevent a disaster, for example.
Yeah,
So-
I was just Googling it. Wow. As soon as I heard the word, I'm like, that's great. And there are a lot of different, municipal applications for that. And I think you guys could probably whip up something great for Grafton.
Yep.
Right, Lindsay.
Yes, thank you. So I know, we're talking about the, need for increasing town services. Do we have like a projected build out or projected growth? I feel like that might be helpful to kind of figure or to discuss that, or I don't know if, that's possible. I know that, this is a 20-year long plan. So, we're about that. So just kind of curious as to numbers wise, where you guys think we're going to be. And that might just be helpful to put into this chapter somewhere.
That can be a
Yeah.
little tricky because typically, we've done build-out projections in the past. And build-out projections are generally done based upon current zoning. And we did one back in for the 2001 master plan. It's at some point, I think, we've been talking about doing an updated build-out analysis. Not sure where that is right now, but it's also, it gets particularly tricky if you're thinking about changing some land use regulations to sort of redirect the development. It's harder to project when we're thinking about possible changes, but don't want to dwell on that right now because, like I said, we've got a few other topics we want to try to get through this evening. Roshan had his hand up for a while. Roshan?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm having some problem. No, probably off topic, but I don't know where to put this, but my question was more on the natural gas and the gas pipelines in the town. Have we addressed that in some place, or is that something that we are thinking about? Just wanted to throw it out there and see what we are thinking about it.
Yeah, there's probably addressing that in the master plan is probably somewhat limited because that's not under the control of the town. It may be worth mentioning just as sort of to provide some more context for what utility infrastructure is available.
Mhm.
But that's probably in terms of planning, in terms of the town planning. I'm not sure where that would lead other than possibly try to proactively convince the utility company to put more gas lines in. Of course, you got to think of that in the context of some fairly recent thinking that is focused on limiting the use of fossil fuels and some of the hazards of natural gas in the home. I don't want to go off the deep end on that within our master plan.
Sure. Yeah. No, I just wanted to bring it up.
So we're still in the town services findings. We got off on this topic basically from the fire department and the concerns about growth in the fire department. Is there anything else we need to say on that? If not, we've got a third bullet point in the findings supporting the Council on Aging and public schools to anticipate population aging.
Yep, that's the last key finding for town services and facilities. So this, I did hear some comments or read some comments about making this a little less confusing about bunching these two. But it's the theme of population shifting to an older population and how we can, at the same time, increase senior services to anticipate having more older residents in Grafton while not leaving the schools behind. That might potentially see a drop in residents if not enough young families are brought in, but we'll still need the same amount of funding, if not more, as funds continue to rise. So that was the last bullet in conversation with both parties here. Any last thoughts on town services and facilities?
I will say that it struck me too, the connecting aging and public schools struck me as being a rather odd combination. Although I see the connection there. And there may be other places that we also address schools or touch on that. See, I think Roshan's hand is still up. And if Roshan doesn't have anything else, we'll go to Mr. Hool.
Thank you, Dave. I had a question with regards to, I noticed it's, you're talking about the age of 60 in the documentation that I read as a starting point for elder. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm past 60 and I don't use those services. And I'm wondering, are we using a realistic number to count our elderly? Because I think most of those services are used by people that are much older, at least people that are on Medicare, you know, collecting Social Security or something that, you know, could use that type of service. I mean, maybe there are some others that are using SSI that would need those services, but I'm referring to just people that would naturally retire. I don't know if it's a state requirement that you use 60 as a number, or if that number is just something we throw out there. But I would feel that that number should be raised. You know, realistically, who's using the services? And you could probably even do a check with the people that are using it now and see what the average age is or median age or whatever it might be. So that we're saying, okay, realistically, when are they going to start using the services, and how's that going to impact the town with realistic numbers? That's all I had to say.
Thank you. 60 comes from the age-friendly plans that are through AARP. So they use all their data for that. And I think the rationale is that 60 is typically the age where you could start using senior center services or council on aging. I want to say that's where it's from, but I totally understand where you're coming from. And it would be helpful if we had a little bit more data for more elder residents than starting at 60. Thank you.
If we're projecting out in terms of use of services, realistically, people at 60 are not using the services. So let's project out where it makes sense to project from. And I would say probably, you know, 65, 67, something like that as a minimum, you know, in terms of projection. So to come up with a realistic number in terms of how we have to support and take care of that particular service in town, and come up with the money for it. That's it. Thank you.
All right, John, you have your hand up.
Yes. To address George initially, I think theoretically 60 may make sense from a national. However, Grafton is a higher income town, and the higher income people are, the more delayed those health services are because of the quality of life and standard of life. With that said, Fiona and I were speaking with the fire chief last Thursday, and he did point out that as people age, the cost in running the ambulance increases very significantly. And people commented that if they're next to senior housing and stuff like that, that they can see the ambulance there daily or near daily, depending on the size. So that cost can get out of control quite easily.
Yeah, it sounds like the sort of the key question for this topic area is, for the services that we're addressing here, you know, at what age does that begin to become significant? I mean, you know, I think generally speaking, you would expect that, you know, as people get older, they tend to be more in need of these services. But you know, at what age, what's kind of the threshold at which it begins to become significant in terms of the master plan here? Sue?
I guess I just wanted to ask, do we really have to know the significance of it in order to have it? What difference does it make if some are using it and some are not? It is being used. And I'm not sure why we have to have a certain significant number to put in the master plan. That's just a question. That's what I'm thinking. I just don't know what the answer is to that.
Fair question, and I would, yeah, I would think in terms of trying to resolve the discussion, it's really, yeah. Does it make a difference what number we quote here as an age? And I think as Sue just pointed out, in terms of the services that the town would be offering or is offering and should be offering, does what we say in this master plan, are we going to say something different if we use 65 instead of 60? Anne Marie?
Yeah,
Hi, thank you. Perhaps we could just, we can go with the 60 and just put in a caveat that obviously, this is subject to change, right? When people's usage changes or, maybe just a statement indicating that 60 is a number that's utilized through AARP. However, this could be an inflated number potentially, right? Just something, a little notation.
Colleen?
To the earlier point that this could potentially be pointed to for grants, I don't think we want to limit ourselves. I think we want to keep ourselves as wide open as possible.
Correct.
yeah, and as always in the master plans, we don't get into fiscal issues in that kind of detail. The point of this was to talk about anticipated growth. This is obviously a moving target with a growth in population aging. And I think that is the message we're trying to get across. Those fiscal decisions will be made year to year, obviously. But I think what we need here is to clarify the age at which residents use those services and maybe get into a little bit more detail by getting some numbers about the use of those programs and services.
Perhaps it would be appropriate to follow up with the Council on Aging, and they might have some numbers for us on age and services provided.
Yeah, and just like I said before, I don't want to get so focused on a specific age number. The focus should be on the services that we're talking about.
That's correct. That's the point I was trying to make.
And I see that George has his hand up.
Yeah, I hearing all the discussion here, it does make sense. I'm not thinking about grants when I'm talking about this. I'm thinking about something completely different in terms of the town planning for spending money. So the grant part of it didn't even cross my mind until somebody brought it up, and I can understand why it is where it is, because you do want to get the funding from wherever the source is coming from. So thanks for the clarification.
All right, anything else on this topic? If not, then we can move into the quality of life.
Would it make sense, Mr. Chair, for me to go over the key findings in a similar fashion for this chapter? I think we have 15 minutes.
Yeah, let's at least start by, we've got two bullet items here under key findings, so.
Great.
And I think there is some other material later on here that doesn't seem to be directly related to key findings, but let's start at least looking at the key findings.
Sure. So this chapter is a little less cut and dry than the other chapters of the master plan, due to this being the additional chapter that Grafton requested. So we took the opportunity to think about ways when we are thinking about budgets and taxes and population shifts and how to support low income people in town, what could be like supplemental resources that the town of Grafton can utilize. And this is also the chance we took to talk about the top theme of communication that came up at our workshops between the town and residents. and kind of merging those to think about how we can best use resident talents and getting more people involved in volunteer positions, filling boards and committees, and increasing that direct line of communication there. So those are our two key findings at the top. Volunteerism as the key to increasing town capacity, and also as a key to implementing the master plan, as something that's come up in these meetings of, this is great, but who's going to do it? I was thinking about how to get more people at the table. And the second finding is the communication between residents in the town through the communications director position, as well as these little action items sprinkled in as ways to get more information flowing. So happy to hear any discussion points that would be helpful in the last few minutes we have.
Yeah. Just a quick question, Sarah. Sorry. The director of communications director position, did that come out of a stakeholder interview as a suggestion, or how did that come about? Just curious. I don't have an opinion.
We first talked about this at the first workshop in October.
Okay.
I think we've mentioned it a few times at the committee meetings in passing as something that the town previously had that could be helpful to bring back.
Yeah, I think when William was first hired, that was his title, a part of his title.
Yes.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was subconsciously what I was thinking. So, I mean, it's not, William wears a lot of, our assistant TA wears a lot of hats already. And, I do see the merit behind somebody whose job it is to handle outreach, but I just wasn't sure. Thank you.
I saw Chantel's hand go up momentarily. You still have something to comment on, Chantel?
I mean, it was more or less the same thing, and just this is why I put the hand down, was because I wasn't sure how I was going to articulate the sort of pause that I was feeling when we're like, because that role is supposed to be part of William's role. So sort of saying like, hey, we want to add this other without the stakeholder. And I don't know if, William and Evan are people that we would talk to as a part of this, but I just, that specific recommendation jumped out at me for the same reasons it did Fiona. It made me feel a kind of way. I don't know how to express how it made me feel.
Anne-Marie.
I think kind of going back to the other thing we were talking about in terms of being so specific, this just seems very specific, right? It's recreating or bringing back this position as opposed to just stating that, the town will continue to try to either delegate this or, I don't know. It kind of is another one of those, like it's super specific for the master plan committee to be coming up with a recommendation relative to, employees or personnel.
Yeah, it might be sufficient to highlight the need for someone to have that responsibility without necessarily saying it has to be its own position. It does happen all too often, and I kind of saw this throughout my working life as well as what I'm seeing, how things evolve in the town, is that if a person doesn't have a specific sort of that, if it's not part of their job description, they might do it when they have time, but it needs to be kind of formally assigned to someone as someone's responsibility, either an individual or shared amongst 2 or 3 people, depending on the particular task. But it's probably sufficient for us right now to identify the need for for that function, communications direction of some sort. And I don't know what the best wording is for it, but there seems to be a need, and we don't necessarily need to dictate exactly how that need is fulfilled. So, in terms of the findings here, goal 3, to create and sustain strong support networks to keep people in Grafton housed and fed, that doesn't seem to relate to either of the two key findings. I'm wondering if, how that connects to the findings we have, or if maybe there needs to be another finding that more specifically relates to that goal, because there's a lot of action items, a lot of ideas here underneath that goal, or a lot of stuff written at any rate. So I'm wondering how does that, how can we more clearly relate that to the findings?
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely add a key finding with some data from, for example, the wait list for the Housing Authority, data from the Grafton Food Bank. That would definitely be appropriate.
And whatever data needs, Sarah and Elena, you need, I will be able to assist you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. And in fact, I think we would love to provide more depth to this by listing a few of the community organizations that the town is partnering with. We always look at Boston. They have a whole series of community organizations providing services to the population in need. So they have all these partnerships. Towns with more limited resources do not, because they have less funding for that. But if we know there are some, such as the Grafton Food Bank, anything we could add to this to expand it would be fantastic.
So I'm kind of curious what everybody thinks about the food desert topic in here. I mean, that's under one specific action item, but there's, it sort of presumes that we have that the food desert is really relevant to Grafton and in a particular way.
Brian and Anne Marie had their hands up.
Yeah, I had them obscured, but I was looking at the page of the report. Brian.
Yeah, when I read that, I was sort of like you. I'm wondering if that really applies to Grafton. Most people, everyone has a car and automobile to get to where they need to go. I mean, Stop and Shop is within a couple of miles. We've got Giretti's within a couple of miles of South Grafton. Stop Shop's I think 3 miles, and Giretti's is probably maybe 4 or 5. And I don't know if we have anybody that's doing any walking anywhere, so I don't know that a food desert really applies in our particular case, because most people have transportation to get where they need to go. There might be some seniors that don't. That may apply to them. I don't want to discount certain groups, but I think I was kind of wondering it myself. So,
all right, Anne Marie, you had your hand up on this.
Yeah, well, I think it does apply. I just not sure how we facilitate, well, especially if there's a chance that Stop and Shop might be closing, right? So there's that. But I think it does apply to South Grafton. And I guess I'm just not sure how we can impact that, I guess, other than potentially zoning and whatnot.
Yeah, Chantal?
Yeah, similarly, I think part of the reason we don't think of it is because we assume everybody who needs transportation has it, and we kind of assume that everyone's easily able to drive to Giretti's or what have you. But I definitely, like Anne Marie noted, specifically thought of South Grafton when I read through this.
Deborah?
I agree with Chantal. We can't just assume that people have transportation. I often see people walking on Worcester Street between the Grafton Housing and the Stop and Shop. And as we develop, and if we develop other low-income housing, we have to make sure that those residents can get to grocery shopping stores and not just assume that they all have a car and transportation is not an issue for them.
Yeah, so my reaction to this is there's a couple of things I note when I was looking at this. One is this doesn't take into account the proximity of shopping in neighboring towns. For people in South Grafton, at least some people I know of, they like to go over to Market 32 in Sutton. There's shopping in Northbridge and Millbury, Goretti's, we mentioned that, Shrewsbury, Market Basket on Route 20, Westboro, Upton. There's a convenience store over in West Upton, not too far from a corner of Grafton. Of course, obviously, all that is predicated on people having cars. And for the most part, it's a fact that if you live in Grafton, you got to have a car. There are not very many places in Grafton where you can live without having a car, because there's almost no public transportation. There's just very little opportunity realistically today in Grafton to exist in Grafton without a car. So the emphasis on walking, while I understand the ideal, it's also doesn't relate very well to most of us in Grafton. And for the people who do get by without a car, they probably live close enough already to Stop and Shop or some of the other places. The map in terms of walking distance, 30 minutes walking distance, most of those red areas for 30 minutes walking distance, there are no sidewalks. So it's not a realistic depiction of walkability. We can hope that in our future development that we will be developing more housing that's in close proximity to shopping. We can look at hopefully developing more shopping along Main Street, in particular Main Street, Farnhamville, and Fisherville, and South Grafton. We can't make it happen. There's no incentive the town can offer to someone to open a market in a place where they're not going to have customers for their market. So you got to be a little bit realistic here about the nature of Grafton as it is and as it is likely to develop over the next 10 to 20 years. And so I think it's not the same as a food desert in a place like Boston or Cambridge. It's just you have to try to understand it in the context of what Grafton is and what it is likely to be within the next 10 or 20 years. So it's a concept that's worth I think worth mentioning, but it's not. When I hear about food deserts, generally speaking, when I read about food deserts, they're not happening in places like Grafton. So it's a concept I don't want to ignore entirely, but I would like to try to make sure that we're sort of realistically addressing it in the context of Grafton. I see 3 hands up right now, Brian, and then Chantel, and then Lindsay.
I will just, agree with what you just said. So that's all I have to say.
Chantel.
Yeah, I mean, I think the action item itself just says to assess zoning and regulations for new food retail in food desert areas, which to me seems like a pretty benign and appropriate action item, given we're also seeking to try to centralize development in those areas. So I don't know that it's asking us to do anything we don't control.
Lindsay.
Yeah, I agree with what Chantel just said. And also, maybe just not using the word food desert, maybe just that, using a different term might be, more agreeable to everyone.
Yeah, I think, there's probably not much question that we could use more shopping for food, probably for other things as well. How we get there and when and why, well, this kind of ties in with some of our ideas that we've talked about in other sessions about, developing more mixed use and more walkable neighborhoods, and that kind of ties in.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for these comments. I think we'll try to capture this discussion and how to reframe this conversation about food access, and make it a little bit more nuanced, and maybe remove the word food desert as you suggested, and just talk about the need for more food retail, the difficulty in accessing it, and just, again, provide a more nuanced conversation based on the feedback that you just gave us.
Yep, and the map. I couldn't identify a couple of the places that are represented on the map in terms of, oh, what are they? I know where the convenience stores are, where the CVS and Stop and Shop. I can pick those out readily on the map. But there's a couple points on the map that I'm not sure what they're intended to represent, but that's kind of a detail. I think ultimately, to the extent that we include this map or something similar, we'll want to identify, what places of business are they actually referring to there? Because there's the one that looks like it's on Snow Road, and I'm not aware of any food store or related store that exists on Snow Road.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll take another look at the map.
Fiona?
Yeah, just one, then not to completely derail the conversation, and I know as a staff member, I don't want to be commandeering the conversation at all, but South Grafton has been and continues to be neglected in town, and I disagree. I think that the area is a food desert. I think that the median household income, household style, access to services and goods in that part of town is something that this plan does need to focus on. I obviously don't want to go against, there's a lot of really good and valid points made by the working group here this evening, but I do think that we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that South Grafton is not receiving the same attention as some other parts of town.
Yeah, I think kind of in this context here, when you look at, generally speaking, you look at the retail-oriented businesses in Grafton. The major retail-oriented business areas in Grafton are Worcester Street, basically from Carroll Road up to Snow Road, and then Worcester Street up from in the North Grafton, the Wyman Gordon area. There's some on North Main Street, and then there's Main Street in South Grafton, which has some businesses, but they're just sort of scattered along Main Street. And that's I think what's unique about the business environment in South Grafton, is that there's not a lot of businesses sort of close together where it's easy to get to several different types of businesses all kind of in the same area. They're just scattered along Main Street, in between a lot of houses. And
exactly.
that's it's potentially an opportunity to sort of rethink and do some and I don't know what to call it. I don't want to call it redevelopment, because I don't think that's quite the right word for it. But there's potential opportunity there for more of the mixed use neighborhood style development that we're all thinking about. So I tend to think of that area of South Grafton not specifically in the context of the availability of food, but more generally the combination of residential and business, and an opportunity there for more business to be located there. Businesses of not limited to food, but more generally retail businesses.
Yeah, that 122 corridor could be something really amazing. I mean, the town has put in a good faith effort to change the zoning in VMU South Grafton to allow a good extent of flexibility, etc. But yeah, I think it just the quality of life in South Grafton compared to other parts of Grafton.
Right. Yeah, sort of, I mean, my thinking in that direction is sort of building on the mixed use zoning, which we've got, which is really focused on the Farnansville area. But you know, you extending farther out on Main Street towards Sutton, you've got the Fisherville area, and farther out the Saundersville area. And those areas, like I said, there's a few businesses scattered along there, but there's nothing really, you know, that they're. I know we're not going to solve that tonight, certainly in our discussion, but that's an area which I think is worthwhile for us to pay attention to. You know, that may be more relevant to the land use topic and the economic development topic. So, is there anything else that we need to discuss?
If I can note, Mr. Chair, that we'll keep this comment period open for Elena. How does June 10th sound? Okay, another week. Happy to receive comments through commenting on the Word document, through emailing it to Fiona, through the matrix, and Elena and I will add everything to that Excel that was linked in tonight's agenda, so you could see what everybody else is commenting as well, and we'll be responding to them as well as we edit the document to reflect the changes appropriately.
So Sarah, comments to me, and then I will funnel them to you to update the matrix yourselves.
Perfect.
Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Okay.
That good for everybody? Works for me anyway. And after all, if it works for me, nobody else's opinion matters, right? Quite to the contrary, everybody's opinion is worthwhile here.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Elena, for all of your hard work. I know that it is a lot to be, you know, gleaning and going through all of the feedback and sorting it and trying to get it into a kind of cohesive narrative that touches on everything. It is impossible to incorporate everything all the time. So, you know, we do, I know I appreciate it very much. And I know this working group does as well. So we'll make sure to get you your comments, and yeah, we'll go from there. And I think, you know, if we need to take more time at the next meeting to kind of talk through this, you know, happy to do that. So just let me know.
And thank you all for your comments.
And we are zeroing in on actually producing a plan. You know, we've got 2 chapters, at least first draft of a couple is written here. Got a few more chapters to go, but sooner or later we had to get this all written. So that's full speed ahead.
Alrighty, so I will send out a reminder email to everybody, and we'll coordinate on the back end. And then we will see, something that we should discuss. I believe the 1st of July is a tough day for a lot of people. Does anybody know if they are unavailable as of today for the July 1st meeting? Colleen?
I think Sue and I will be unavailable on July 1st.
Okay, so Sarah and Elena, and Brian, sorry, you had your hand up as well.
I was just gonna say, I'm also unavailable that entire week, so.
Okay, so we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sarah and Elena, do you want to consider moving it to another day?
I think that should be fine with us.
Okay, do you have any limitations on what day it can be? Do you want to keep it on a Monday?
We could, so the next Monday after that would be the 8th, right?
Yeah, so one thing I will say, planning board will.
Yeah, Fiona and I would not be available on the 8th.
Exactly.
Or the 22nd.
Yeah.
Could I
15th.
suggest going the other direction and doing June 24th? So we don't push out, we push back. I'm not
June
available
24th.
that day. I'm just throwing it out there.
We may not have, we probably will, but we're running into the risk of not having the next chapter ready, which is the transportation chapter. It's getting there. And we we have a draft almost ready, but then we enter into the copy editing phase. That's the only danger with that.
Yeah, if we consider July 15th,
Right, I was just gonna say
there,
that.
there would then be 3 weeks between that and the first Monday in August.
Huh, true.
Does that make sense, Sarah and Elena, or is that still too?
I think that should be fine.
Yep, that works with me too.
Okay. Okay, and is anybody, everybody else, working group members, does that sound good, the 15th? All right,
As far as I know.
Yeah,
awesome.
summer can be a challenging time to organize meetings, particularly with a larger group, because some people tend to take vacations over the summer, July and August.
Yeah.
Yes, how selfish. No, just kidding. Okay, awesome. So we'll move forward with that then. And yeah, okay, great. And Sarah and Elena, let me know if you need anything in the meantime, but thank you again for all your help. We're getting through it, so.
Thank you all for your feedback. It was very useful.
All right, is there anything
Chair.
else that we may need to address before we adjourn? If not, a motion to adjourn might be in order.
Move
So
to
moved.
adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Call for a roll call vote. John Allen,
Yes.
Victoria Duckworth,
Aye.
Susan Duvall,
Aye.
Lindsay Fox,
Aye.
Henry Foley,
Fully aye.
Deborah George,
Aye.
Julie Grace,
Aye.
Linda Hassinger,
Aye.
Brian Hool,
Aye.
Chantel Kimball,
Aye.
David Robbins votes aye, Sue Robbins,
Aye.
Eileen Roy,
Aye.
and Roshana Tangi.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.